A smile is the most expensive thing I ever produced, more expensive than the dinners, and I produced dinners for 10 years that cost more in labor and precision and the sustained performance of expertise than anything else I have done in my 61 years of living. More expensive than the 10 years of service itself, which cost what 10 years of service always costs, which is the specific accumulated price of performing, daily and completely, a version of yourself that is not yourself, but that the situation requires you to present as yourself until the presenting and the being becomes so thoroughly practiced that only the person doing the presenting knows with certainty where the one ends and the other begins. The smile cost more than all of it. The smile was the most demanding performance of my life, and I gave it for 10 years across every situation that required it, which was every situation, because the smile was not a response to specific occasions, but a permanent feature of how I was required to present myself in the Pemberton household, a requirement so thoroughly established in the first weeks of my tenure there that it had become invisible to the people who required it, simply the way I was, rather than something that was required of me, which was exactly where I needed it to be. My name is Cora. I'm 61 years old. I was born enslaved in Loudoun County, Virginia, in the year 1802, the daughter of a field hand named Isaac and a cook named Martha, who had been feeding the Holloway family for 20 years before I was born, and who fed them for 15 years after, when I was old enough to work beside her and begin the education that would define the next 40 years of my life, which was the education of someone who feeds people for a living and who understands completely and from the inside what that means. Feeding people is power. This is the thing I understood before I understood anything else about the work, before I understood the chemistry of heat and flavor, or the specific timing that distinguishes food that is merely prepared from food that is produced, before I understood any of the technical elements of cooking that my mother's teaching eventually gave me. I understood the power first, the way children understand power before they understand anything about how it operates, which is in the direct experience of what happens when you have what someone else needs, and when the having of it gives you something that the needing of it gives them, which is not just the food, but the specific dependency that comes from needing something that only one person knows how to produce. The Pemberton family needed me from the moment I arrived at their plantation in Fauquier County, Virginia in the spring of 1850. Not because they understood what they needed, because the specific quality of what the Pemberton family needed was not a quality they would have been able to articulate if you had asked them to. They needed a cook who would produce food at the level their social position required, and their social position required the level that they had been aspiring to for 15 years and had not yet consistently achieved. And I was the specific person who could produce that level because my mother had spent 20 years teaching me to produce it, and because I had spent the preceding years of my life producing it for 2 other households and building the specific reputation that produced the inquiry that brought me to the Pemberton plantation in the spring of 1850. I arrived and I began. And in the beginning I also began something else, something that the Pemberton family did not see because they were not the kind of family that looked carefully at the things that were happening around them when those things were being done by people they had decided were not the kind of people whose actions required close observation. I began building the dinner, not the anniversary dinner specifically, not yet. I began building the understanding of the Pemberton household that the anniversary dinner would eventually require, the specific comprehensive knowledge of the people I was cooking for and what they needed, and what they feared, and what the specific social occasion of an anniversary dinner in Fauquier County, Virginia, in 1860 would require of the person producing it, the person whose hands and whose knowledge and whose 10 years of accumulated understanding of every detail of the Pemberton household would be the most significant variable in the outcome of that occasion. I built that understanding across 10 years with the smile on my face and the patience of someone who had decided at the beginning what the end was going to be, and who had the specific quality of patience that a person develops when they have made a decision of that kind, and when the decision is the organizing fact of everything they do. 10 years. Every slap. I smiled every time. Randolph Pemberton was 52 years old when I arrived at Oakhurst Plantation in the spring of 1850. He was a man who had been building toward something for his entire adult life and who had not yet arrived at the thing he was building toward, which was the specific kind of social prominence in Fauquier County that the families at the top of the county's hierarchy possessed, and that Randolph had been pursuing through the combination of land acquisition and advantageous marriage and the cultivation of relationships with the people above him in the hierarchy that characterized the aspirational planter of mid-19th century Virginia. He had not arrived because arrival required the specific quality of ease that the people who were born at the top possessed, and that the people who were building toward the top could not produce regardless of how much they had. The ease of people who have never had to work for the thing they have, and who therefore carry it without the specific tension of someone who is always managing the gap between where they are and where they want to be. Randolph managed that gap with the sustained performance of a man who was working very hard at appearing not to work very hard, and the performance was good but not perfect, and the imperfection was visible to anyone who was paying attention with the right questions in mind. His wife, Dorothea, was 48, a woman from one of the old Fauquier County families whose marriage to Randolph had been the most significant social acquisition of his career, a marriage that had given him the family connection he had been lacking and that had given her the financial security that her own family's declining fortunes required, a transaction that both parties understood and that neither acknowledged directly, because direct acknowledgement would have violated the specific social fiction that the marriage required in order to function as a social performance. Dorothea was the person who slapped me. I want to say this plainly, and without the softening that accounts of such things sometimes apply, because the plainness is the accurate account, and the accurate account is what I owe the 10 years the plainness describes. Dorothea slapped me for the first time in my second week at Oakhurst, for a reason I will not describe in detail, because the reason was not a reason, but a pretext, the specific kind of pretext that a woman in her position in that household at that time found available whenever she needed one, and she found one on a Tuesday afternoon in April of 1850, and she used it. I smiled, not immediately, not in the specific second of the slap itself, because the specific second of the slap itself required the involuntary response that a slap produces regardless of the smile that follows it. In the 2 seconds after, when the choice was available, I smiled, the specific smile of a woman who has received a correction and who accepts the correction with the gratitude of someone who understands that the correction is given for her benefit. Dorothea did not know what the smile cost. She did not know that the smile was a performance, or that performances of that quality are the most expensive things a person produces, or that the specific person producing it had been building from the moment of the first smile, a 10-year account whose settlement she was going to attend. She received the smile as what it appeared to be, which was the response of a servant who knew her place, and she went back to whatever she had been doing before the pretext had presented itself, and I went back to the kitchen, and I continued building the dinner. The Pemberton household's other significant member was their son Edward, who was 24 when I arrived, and who was, in the years of my tenure, the element of the household that changed most visibly, from the young man of 24 who had his father's aspirations and his mother's specific quality of casual cruelty toward the people who served him, to the man of 34, who had added to his parents' qualities the specific quality of a person who has spent 10 years being enabled in every impulse by the world around him, and who has no framework for understanding why that enabling might not continue indefinitely. Edward slapped me 4 times across the 10 years. Each time I smiled. Each time the smile was added to the account. The kitchen at Oakhurst was the best kitchen I had worked in, which was a significant statement, given the 2 households I had worked in before Oakhurst, both of which had been wealthy households with well-equipped kitchens. The Pemberton kitchen was well-equipped because Randolph had understood, when he built the new kitchen in 1844, that the kitchen was a social instrument as much as a functional one, that the food produced in a kitchen was the most direct expression of a household's ambitions, and that the kitchen that produced that food needed to be the best available if the food was going to be the best available. He had built the best available kitchen in Fauquier County. He had then spent 6 years unable to fully use it because the cooks who preceded me were adequate rather than exceptional, and adequate was not what the kitchen was built for. I was what the kitchen was built for. I understood this from my first examination of the space, walking through it on my first day at Oakhurst, with the specific attention of a craftsman assessing a new workshop, noting the equipment and the organization and the supply arrangements and the specific opportunities the space provided for the kind of work I was capable of, and I understood that the kitchen and my capabilities were precisely matched in the way that a tool and the work it was built for are matched, which is completely. I began using it completely from the first day, not because I was performing the excitement of a craftsman in a new workshop, though there was genuine professional satisfaction in working in a kitchen of that quality, because the complete use of the kitchen from the first day was the most efficient way to establish in the Pemberton family's understanding of what they had acquired when they acquired me, the specific level of dependency that 10 years of exceptional cooking would build toward the specific purpose I was building toward. I'm not going to describe every dinner I produced in those 10 years. I'm going to describe what the dinners collectively accomplished, which was the construction of the Pemberton family's social reputation as the most exceptional table in Fauquier County, a reputation that had not existed before my arrival, and that was, by the middle of the decade, the most significant social asset the family possessed, the thing that their social position most depended on, and that was most completely and most irreplaceably mine to give or to withhold. The social occasions I produced dinner for across 10 years included the quarterly dinner parties that the Pembertons hosted for the leading families of the county, the specific occasions that were the primary arena in which social reputation was built and maintained in Fauquier County society, and the larger annual occasions, the Christmas dinner and the harvest celebration and the anniversary dinner, which was the specific occasion that I had been building toward from my first week at Oakhurst. The Pembertons' anniversary dinner was the most significant social event in their year. It had been established in the early years of their marriage as the occasion on which they demonstrated to Fauquier County society the specific level of their household's ambitions, the occasion at which the guest list included the most prominent families in the county, and the menu was the most ambitious and the execution was required to be flawless. In the years before my arrival, it had been adequate. In the years after my arrival, it became exceptional, and then renowned, and then the specific social occasion in Fauquier County that people sought invitations to rather than simply accepted when they came, the dinner whose reputation in the county was the most direct expression of the Pemberton family's arrived social position. I built that reputation dinner by dinner across 10 years, and in the building of it, I built simultaneously the specific dependency that the 10th anniversary dinner would exploit. I want to be precise about what I was building and what I was not building, because precision matters more than anything else in this account, and because the imprecise account produces the wrong understanding of what happened in the autumn of 1860. I was not building a plan to kill anyone. I want to say this as plainly as I said that Dorothea slapped me and that I smiled, because the plainness is what the account requires, and the plainness here is as important as the plainness there. I was building a plan to produce, through the specific occasion of the Pemberton anniversary dinner in the autumn of 1860, a specific outcome for the Pemberton family and for their social position in Fauquier County that was different from the outcome they were expecting. An outcome that was the product of 10 years of accumulated knowledge about the family and the county and the specific social dynamics of the anniversary dinner, and the specific social anxieties of the people who attended it, and the specific vulnerabilities of the Pemberton family's social position that 10 years of careful observation had made entirely visible to me. The title of this account says, "No one survived." I want to address that directly and honestly. The survivors and the non-survivors of the anniversary dinner of 1860 were determined by choices that the people who attended it made, not by anything I put in the food. The food was perfect. The food was the best food I had ever produced, the full expression of 10 years of professional development in the finest kitchen in Fauquier County, produced with every skill I possessed and applied with every ounce of attention I had, because the food's perfection was not incidental to the plan, but central to it. What survived and what did not survive the anniversary dinner was not the people. It was the social fiction. It was the specific performance of the Pemberton family's social position, the performance that 10 years of my cooking had been the primary instrument of, the performance that the anniversary dinner was the annual culmination of, and that the specific information that I had arranged to be present at the anniversary dinner of 1860 was designed to permanently dismantle. The anniversary dinner of 1860 was the night the Pemberton family's social position in Fauquier County did not survive, and I served that dinner with a smile. Across 10 years of producing exceptional dinners for Fauquier County's most prominent families, I had been in the specific position that all exceptional servants are in, which is the position of someone whose excellence makes them invisible in the specific way that things you rely on completely become invisible. The chair you sit in every day, the road you travel every morning, the person who produces the food you eat at every significant occasion of your social life. I had been invisible in that way for 10 years, and in the invisibility I'd been doing what I'd been doing for my entire career, which was paying complete attention to everything around me, because complete attention to everything around me was the survival practice that the kitchen required for its excellence, and the survival practice that my situation required for its safety, and the two practices were the same practice applied to different domains, and were therefore, for someone who had been practicing both since childhood, inseparable. What 10 years of complete attention to the social world of Fauquier County, conducted from the position of the woman who produced the food at every significant social occasion, had given me was comprehensive. I knew the Merriweather family's financial situation in the specific detail of someone who had been serving their dinners for 10 years and who had been present in the room during the conversations that happen when prominent people are eating food that is excellent enough to make them forget they are not alone. I knew the Ashby family's specific marital situation, which was different from the public account of it in ways that the public account had been carefully constructed to prevent the public from knowing. I knew the Covington family's business arrangements and the specific element of those arrangements that was not what it was represented as being, an element I had been aware of since the second anniversary dinner, when the conversation at the table had produced information that I had filed with the same care I filed everything. I knew the Pemberton family's own specific secrets, the secrets that 10 years of proximity in the most intimate domestic spaces of the household had made available to me, secrets about Randolph's finances and about Edward's specific behavior during his time at college, and about the specific circumstances of Dorothea's family that she had been managing for the duration of the marriage, and that were more significant in their implications than anything in the public account of the Pemberton family's history suggested. I also knew from 10 years of observation the specific social dynamics of the anniversary dinner guests as a group, the specific relationships between the families and the specific tensions between them, and the specific information that, if it were to become available to specific people at the specific occasion, would produce the specific social consequences that those families' situations pointed toward. I had been thinking about which pieces of information placed in front of which people at which moment in the anniversary dinner would produce the outcome I needed. I had been thinking about this with the specific precision that I brought to the construction of every dinner menu, the precision of understanding the ingredients and their interactions and the specific sequence of their presentation that produced the cumulative effect the occasion required. The anniversary dinner menu I designed for 1860 was the most carefully constructed menu of my career. Every course was chosen not just for its flavor and its technical achievement, but for the specific social function it served in the overall sequence of the evening, the specific conversational atmosphere it would produce, and the specific state of receptiveness in the guests it would create for the information that was going to arrive in the later courses of the evening. I'm going to describe the mechanism through which the information was going to arrive, because the mechanism is the most significant element of what I built. The mechanism I built for the anniversary dinner of 1860 was not something I could build alone, and I want to be honest about the other people who were part of it, not in the specific detail that would identify them or their descendants, but in the general acknowledgement that what I did was not done only by me. that the specific network of relationships I had built across 10 years of producing dinners for the households of Fauquier County included people who understood what I was building toward and who contributed to the building in the ways available to them. The mechanism had two components. The first component was the physical arrangement of the dinner itself, the specific choices I made about who sat where and who was served what, and the specific sequence of the courses and the specific timing of the service, all of which were within my direct control as the person managing the kitchen and the service. Because 10 years of exceptional performance had given me the specific operational authority over the dinner's execution that exceptional performance always eventually produces when the people depending on the performance have come to depend on it so completely that they no longer question the decisions that produce it. Randolph did not review the seating arrangement for the anniversary dinner of 1860. He had reviewed it in the first 3 years and had stopped in the fourth when he had understood that my seating arrangements were consistently more successful than his had been, that the dinners I arranged produced a better quality of conversation and a better social atmosphere than the ones he had arranged, and that the better quality was the product of a more sophisticated understanding of the social dynamics of the room than he possessed. He had, by the 10th anniversary dinner, entirely surrendered the management of the dinner's execution to me. This was the most significant operational fact of the evening, the fact that the person who had spent 10 years building the dinner's reputation was also the person with complete operational control of its execution, with no oversight from the family and no review of any decision I made. The second component was the information itself and the specific mechanism of its delivery. I am not going to describe this component in the same detail as the first, because the second component involved people other than myself, and the protection of those people requires me to be less specific than the full account would otherwise be. What I will say is that the information arrived at the anniversary dinner through channels that were invisible to the people receiving it, in the sense that the channels did not appear to be channels, that the information came to the guests' attention in ways that looked like the natural accidents of conversation rather than the deliberate placement of specific information in front of specific people at specific moments by a specific person. I had been thinking about how to produce this appearance for years. The specific challenge of making deliberate information delivery look accidental is the challenge of making any deliberate thing look natural, which is the challenge that all performance faces, and that the best performance resolves through the complete integration of what is being produced with the context in which it is being produced, so that the thing being produced does not stand out from the context, but flows from it naturally and inevitably. The anniversary dinner was a context I had been building for 10 years. I knew it completely. I knew the rhythms of conversation it produced and the specific moments when the guests were most receptive to information and the specific emotional states that the food and the wine and the social atmosphere of the occasion created in the people experiencing it. I knew all of this from 10 years of observation, from the kitchen and the service spaces, the observation of someone who was present in every room and at every course, and who had been attending to everything that the occasion produced with complete attention across 10 years of its production. I knew how to make deliberate delivery look inevitable. I had been practicing for 10 years without the guests knowing I was practicing. The anniversary dinner of 1860 was held on the third Saturday of October, which was the date the Pembertons had always held it, the specific autumn date when the summer's heat had broken and the evening air had the quality that Virginia autumn evenings have, cool and clear and carrying in them the specific smell of the season, turning that makes outdoor spaces and candlelit rooms feel simultaneously like the end of something and the beginning of something else. I had been preparing for 6 weeks. The preparation was the most comprehensive preparation I had ever undertaken for any dinner, not because the technical demands were greater than previous anniversary dinners, but because the preparation included everything the technical demands required and also everything the other requirements required, which was everything I have been describing across the previous 6 chapters and which had been in preparation in various dimensions for 10 years. The guest list for the anniversary dinner of 1860 was the most prominent guest list the Pembertons had ever assembled. 16 people representing 8 of the most prominent families in Fauquier County. 16 people whom I had been feeding for 10 years and whose situations I understood completely. and whose presence at this specific dinner, in the specific seating arrangement I had designed, created the specific social chemistry that the evening required. I will describe the dinner in the specific detail that the occasion deserves, because the dinner was the full expression of 10 years of the best professional work I was capable of producing, and it deserves the specific accounting of that work. The first course was a soup, a consommé of a clarity and depth of flavor that I had been refining across 10 years of anniversary dinners, each year incrementally improved from the previous until the version I served in October of 1860 was the perfection of what the version at the first anniversary dinner had pointed toward. The consommé was served with a specific garnish that I had designed for this dinner in particular, a garnish whose composition and presentation were calculated to produce in the guests the specific quality of attention and appreciation that set the tone for everything that followed. The second course was a fish course, a preparation of Chesapeake oysters in a sauce that was the most technically demanding thing I had ever produced in a domestic kitchen, the product of 3 weeks of refinement and the specific knowledge of a sauce's chemistry that my mother's teaching had given me, and that 20 years of practice had deepened to the point where I could produce it with the precision that the specific outcome required. The third course was a remove, the transition between the lighter courses and the heavier courses, a preparation that served the specific function of the palate's preparation for what was coming, and that served, in the context of this specific evening, a different function as well, which was the function of the conversational bridge between the early courses of the evening and the later ones, the preparation that allowed the room to settle into the specific quality of relaxed engagement that the later courses would exploit. The fourth and fifth courses were the main courses, a preparation of game and a preparation of beef that were the most technically accomplished things I had ever produced in any kitchen, the full expression of everything I knew about the application of heat and flavor and timing, and the specific qualities of the Virginia ingredients I had been working with for 10 years. Each course arrived at the table with the specific timing I had designed, timed not just to the state of the food but to the state of the conversation, delivered to the table in the specific moments when the delivery would produce the specific conversational transitions that the evening's plan required. I served each course from the kitchen with the full attention of my professional capability and with the specific additional attention of someone who was monitoring, through the information that reached the kitchen from the dining room, through the service pathways that the kitchen and the dining room shared, the state of the evening and its development toward the point where the second component of the mechanism would do its work. The second component began its work in the sixth course. The sixth course was the cheese course, the transitional course between the main courses and the dessert, the course that marked the point in the evening when the formality of the dinner relaxed and the conversation became more general and more personal, and more honest in the specific way that a long evening of excellent food and wine and the particular social atmosphere of a gathering of people who know each other well and who have been eating and drinking together for 3 hours produces. This was the point I had been building toward. This was the specific moment in the specific evening that 10 years of preparation had been pointing toward, the moment when the social atmosphere was most receptive to the information that I had been arranging to be present, and when the specific people who needed to receive specific pieces of information were seated in the specific positions where the receiving was most likely to occur, in the specific way I needed it to occur. I am not going to describe in detail the specific information or the specific mechanism of its delivery. I am going to describe the effect, because the effect is what the account is about, and the specific mechanism is not mine to describe in a way that would identify the people who were part of it. What happened in the sixth course and in the dessert course that followed was this. Across the final 2 courses of the Pemberton Anniversary Dinner of 1860, specific information arrived in the attention of specific guests in ways that produced, in each case, the specific social effect that the information's content and the social dynamics of the room made inevitable once the information was present. The Merriweather family's financial situation became known to the Covington family, whose business arrangement with the Merriweathers was directly affected by the financial situation and whose investment in that arrangement they would not have maintained if they had known the situation. And the knowing of it produced in the dinner table the specific dynamic of a relationship changing in real time, visible to the other guests as an atmosphere that had shifted without the precise cause of the shift being fully clear. The Ashby family's marital situation became known to the Holloway family, with whom the Ashbys maintained a specific social relationship that the public account of the marital situation had always been necessary to maintain, and the knowing of it produced the specific withdrawal of that relationship that the social world of Fauquier County observed in the weeks after the dinner, as the first visible sign of what the dinner had contained. And the Pemberton family's own specific secrets arrived, in the specific form I had arranged for them to arrive, in the attention of the guests most positioned to act on them, the guests whose own situations the Pemberton secrets most directly affected, and who had the most reason to change their assessment of the Pemberton family's position once they had the information the assessment required. I served the dessert course while all of this was happening. I served it with the full professional attention I brought to every course, and with the smile that had been the organizing expression of my 10 years at Oakhurst, and I carried the dessert to the table, and I placed each preparation in front of each guest with the specific care of someone doing work that deserves that care regardless of everything else the work is also doing. And I watched, from the specific position of the person at the table who is always present and never observed, the specific unraveling of the social fiction that 10 years of exceptional cooking had been used to construct. The dinner lasted until 11 o'clock. The guests departed into the October night in the various states of disturbance and distraction, and the specific quality of altered understanding that the evening had produced in each of them, altered in the ways that the information I had arranged to arrive had altered it, and the alteration was not reversible because the information was now known, and known information cannot be unknown. I cleaned the kitchen. I cleaned it with the same thorough professional attention I brought to the cleaning of the kitchen after every dinner, because the kitchen deserved that attention regardless of everything else the evening had contained. Then I sat in the chair by the window that looked out toward the Oakhurst garden, and I let the evening arrive in me the way things arrive when you have been working toward them for a long time, and they have finally come. And I sat with it for a while in the quiet kitchen in the October night. The Pemberton family's social position in Fauquier County did not survive the anniversary dinner of 1860. I want to describe this accurately because accuracy is what the account owes the 10 years it describes. The survival and the non-survival happened in the specific way that social positions are dismantled in close communities, which is gradually and then comprehensively the gradual accumulation of changed assessments, producing a threshold beyond which the social position that has been the subject of the changing assessments is no longer what it was, no longer held by the community in the form it was held before the changing began. The changing began the morning after the dinner, when the people who had been at the table began in the specific way that people begin the morning after a significant social occasion to process what the evening had contained. The processing produced conversations. The conversations produced further information circulation. The further information circulation reached people who had not been at the dinner and who had their own reasons for the information to be significant, and the network of consequences that began the morning after the October dinner continued to expand through the autumn and winter of 1860 and into the year of 1861, which was a year that produced its own comprehensive dismantling of everything in Virginia that had been standing on a foundation that the truth of what it actually was could not support. The Merriweather business arrangement with the Covingtons was dissolved in November. The Ashby family's social position contracted in the specific way of a family whose public account no longer matches the private knowledge of the community around it. The Pemberton family's specific secrets, known now to the people most affected by them, produced the specific recalibration of the relationships that had been the foundation of Randolph's social position, a recalibration that reduced that position from the arrived prominence he had been performing for 15 years to the actual position that his actual situation and actual capabilities warranted. Randolph understood what had happened, not immediately, not in the week after the dinner. Over the autumn, as the consequences accumulated and the pattern of them became visible, he arrived at the understanding that the evening had been more than what it appeared, and that the source of what it had been more than was in his kitchen. He came to the kitchen on a November morning 6 weeks after the dinner, and he stood in the doorway, and he looked at me with the specific expression of a man who has arrived at an understanding he did not want to arrive at, and who is managing the arrival with the specific controlled composure of someone who is calculating his available responses and finding them limited. I was preparing the morning's work when he came. I continued preparing it. I looked at him with the composed professional attention I had been bringing to every interaction with every member of the Pemberton family for 10 years, the face that had been my most significant professional production across a decade of significant professional productions. He said nothing. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, and he looked at me, and I looked back at him, and the specific silence between us contained everything that the 10 years had contained, and that neither of us was going to speak directly. Then he left. He did not dismiss me. He did not accuse me. He did not do anything that would have required him to say directly what he understood, because saying it directly would have required the acknowledgement that what had happened at the anniversary dinner was not an accident, and that the person who had produced it was the person who had been producing his most important social occasions for 10 years, and whom he had been entirely dependent on for the production of those occasions, and whose removal would leave him in a position he had not been in since before the dependency began. He understood all of this. I understood that he understood it. And the specific understanding between us, never spoken directly, was the foundation of the final arrangement. The arrangement was produced in December of 1860, 6 weeks after the October dinner, through the specific mechanism of Randolph Pemberton's lawyer, presenting me with documents that freed me and provided me with a sum sufficient to establish myself independently, and my acceptance of those documents with the composed professional courtesy of someone receiving what was offered and understanding what the offering was. It was not an apology. It was not an acknowledgement. It was a transaction conducted through the specific impersonal mechanism of legal documents and a lawyer's office that converted the specific situation I was in into a different specific situation without requiring anyone to say directly what had produced the conversion. I accepted it as what it was, a transaction conducted on the basis of the specific understanding between two people who were not going to speak directly about what they understood, a transaction that produced freedom and resources and the specific legal status that the documents represented from the specific person who had the power to produce those things in exchange for the specific thing I had that he needed, which was the assurance, implicit in the acceptance of the arrangement, that the anniversary dinner had been the extent of what the 10 years had been building toward, and that the departure from Oakhurst was the conclusion of the account rather than an installment in a continuing one. I left Oakhurst in December of 1860. I left with the Freedom Papers and the money and the specific skills of a woman who had been producing exceptional food for 20 years and who was now in a position to produce it for herself and for whatever purposes and whatever people she chose. I am 61 years old. I live in Alexandria, Virginia, which is where I settled after leaving Fauquier County, in the specific city that the war and its aftermath had made into a place where the specific combination of what I was and what I knew could be applied in ways that the world before the war would not have permitted. I cook. I cook for the community that Alexandria's free black population built in the years after the war, for the specific occasions that the building of that community produces, the celebrations and the mournings and the ordinary meals that sustain daily life, and the specific exceptional occasions that mark the times when what the community has achieved deserves to be marked with the full expression of what the community's best cook can produce. I cook with the full professional attention I have always brought to the work. I cook without the smile, because the smile was a performance I gave for 10 years in a specific situation that required it, and that situation ended in December of 1860, and I have not had cause to give it since, because the situations I am in now are situations in which what is required of me is not the performance of a version of myself that is not myself, but simply the full expression of what I am, which is a woman who knows how to feed people and who understands, completely and from the inside, what that means. Dorothea Pemberton died in the spring of 1861 of an illness that the doctor attributed to the stresses of the preceding year, which had been the most stressful year in the Pemberton family's history. I heard about her death through the networks that connected Alexandria to the rest of Virginia with the efficiency of information that always travels faster than the authorities who would prefer to control it. I felt what I felt, which was not grief and not satisfaction in any simple sense, and not the specific emotion that the title of this account might suggest the ending should produce. I felt something more complicated and more honest than any of those things, which was the specific feeling of someone who has spent 10 years producing a specific outcome and who has produced it, and who is now on the other side of the producing, which is the side where the outcome is simply part of the past, and the present is what it is, which is a kitchen in Alexandria, and the community that needs feeding, and the specific full expression of the work that the work has always deserved. I gave the Pemberton family 10 years of the best professional work I was capable of producing. I gave them dinners that built their social position and their reputation, and the specific kind of standing in Fauquier County society that they had been working toward for 15 years. I gave them every skill I had and every hour of attention the work required, and I gave it with a smile on my face for every slap and every slight and every specific diminishment of the 10 years, and I gave it because the giving was the building, and the building was the 10 years, and the 10 years was the dinner, and the dinner was the end of the account. The smile cost everything it cost, and it produced everything it produced, and I do not regret either the cost or the production. Every slap, every smile, every dinner.
This is the story of Cora, born enslaved in Loudoun County, Virginia in 1802, who served as the head cook at Oakhurst Plantation in Fauquier County, Virginia, from 1850 until her freedom in December of 1860. Fauquier County records document the Pemberton family and the Oakhurst property through the antebellum period. The specific use of culinary skill and social knowledge as instruments of resistance by enslaved cooks is documented in the historical scholarship on slavery and domestic labor in the antebellum South. The specific social dynamics of Fauquier County's planter society in the 1850s and 1860s, and the role of the kitchen and the cook in the construction and maintenance of that society's social performances are extensively documented in accounts of the period. Cora Freeman appears in Alexandria, Virginia records from 1861 onward as a free woman of color. She died in Alexandria in 1863 at age 61. Her account, written in the months before her death, was preserved by the Alexandria Free Black community and donated to the Virginia Historical Society in 1936, where it has been studied by historians of slavery, culinary history, and resistance as one of the most detailed first-person accounts of sustained professional resistance in the antebellum domestic sphere. If Cora's story moved you, if you believe that the most complete performance of a role can be simultaneously the most complete undermining of the system that requires the performance, that 10 years of patient building produces outcomes that 1 year of urgency cannot reach, and that the smile given to every slap can be the most expensive and the most strategic thing a person ever produces. Subscribe now and join us as we continue uncovering the stories that history tried to bury. Leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. Tell us what stayed with you most about Cora's story. The smile that cost everything. The 10 years of building. The October evening. The kitchen in December. The arrangement that required nothing to be said directly. The Alexandria kitchen where the smile was no longer required. Subscribe, comment, share, and prepare for more voices that history tried to silence but could not.